Welcome. So I wanted to talk today, and I'm really honored to be at the opening bell of the show before hopefully you've pulled out your wallet a whole lot of times and maybe bought some stuff that you don't really need. And I include myself in that stuff. I'm not trying to sell you the book. I'd love to sell you the book. It will save you more than the cost of book, which right now is half price at my table 7 out there. Because as an audiophile, I've been at this since Heathkit was letting me build equipment back when I was a teenager in Michigan. And as a musician, a composer, my Ph.D. is in music. I know how to read and write music and follow an Elliott Carter score, which was actually kind of challenging in composition class because it's really hard to count 1, 2, 3, 4 when the score doesn't have any measures of 4, 4. You know, as a composition student, if you were the person right up next to the music stand while the person is playing this piece of music, you were obliged to turn the page at the right time. The right time means that music has gone by and you're kind of looking around and people are thinking, he's not following the music because he's not going to turn the page. I can do that. It's one of those things. I have a degree in computer science, master's degree as a matter of fact. I write code. I don't like to write code. I have. And I spent 12 years repairing electronics at Cal State University Northridge when I was in charge of their recording arts area. And since 1992, I have taught and been the head of the recording arts area just up the street at Cal State Dominguez Hills. I built a company of 56 people, producing DVDs, producing audio, doing post-production audio. Now I lease those rooms out to other younger, more energetic people than myself. And I have worked in live sound, production sound, did the Olympic Arts Festival in 1984. I think I have a pretty diverse background and therefore have a legitimate reason to comment on the area that we're all interested in, which is the reproduction of music, of audio at home. And it's a mess. It really is honestly a mess. And I find after roughly 20 years of my life and the decision back in 2000 to start AIX Records, I had been one of those pay for his time. You go in the studio, you master a record, you're done. At the end of the day, you pay the bill, and that's that. You don't ever get any upside for that. I saw Bad Company Vinyl in one of the vendors out in their marketplace. I worked with Paul Rogers on a couple of records, lead singer of Bad Company. It was lots of fun, but you never had an upside. There was no royalties associated with being a mastering engineer. But there is if you're a record company and you sell another record. You didn't have to do the record over again. You simply put another one in a package, ship it off to somebody, and you're good to go. So I said, at that point, we had to make some new recordings to create a catalog of high-resolution content. We didn't have high-resolution content before 2000. That's worth repeating. All of the recordings, anything out there in the marketplace, anything that you download from HD tracks, anything that you find from a company offering high-res music, not high-res audio, I'll talk about that a little bit later. That's hardware, not software. So when you see the high-res audio logo on GoBuzz, it's BS. They're not selling hardware, they're selling software. Hardware is high-res audio, software is high-res music, a really lame logo that the Naris people came up with. But whatever, everything before 2000, anything recorded on analog tape, anything recorded at CD spec, 44.1 16-bit audio, that's all standard resolution audio. It means something. Facts count. That's standard resolution audio with an asterisk up in the corner. I'll come back to that. So I'm thinking in 2000, I'm going to be the guy, because I don't have a catalog. If I got a couple extra bucks, I got a facility, I know a bunch of people, I know John McEwen, Willie Nelson, Supertramp, I know a bunch of people, Lawrence Juver from Paul McCartney. I can be the guy that will invest in that next generation of recordings, which are then bona fide high-resolution tracks by virtue of the fact that I have put a group of musicians on a stage in an auditorium in downtown LA, It said, play your record, play your album, sing and play, all at the same time, like a live performance, but without an audience and no PA. Live reverb for the hall that's in the back. This is a beautiful auditorium, 1.8 seconds, beautiful 9-foot Steinway piano. I'm the guy that's going to make these recordings. Real high-resolution recordings. 96K, 24 bits, from the moment it comes in the microphone, gets digitized, put onto my workstation, which happened at that point to be Euphonics R1, a 96K 24-bit, crystal semiconductors, benchmark ATDs, preamps. I did what I assumed would be the very best that I can do. And actually, if you open up the book, the whole first chapter, 123 pages, has tables that show you the dynamic range, shows you what a CD does in terms of frequency response. And I'm revved up and have been in my blog forever saying, holy cow, wouldn't it be great if we had, a 97 dB of dynamic range? Because my recordings have that kind of dynamic range. So I feel I succeeded. I can make recordings that will actually light up speakers and amplifiers and DACs in ways that nothing else can. And I started a blog, and I started talking about this, and I got up in front of a lot of people over the course of many years of trade shows, and I said, welcome to the world of high-resolution audio. Welcome to the world of high-resolution music. These recordings, of which I've made 100 albums, and I've put 71 of them, 2 minutes of 71 albums on one disc. If you've got 10 bucks, or if you buy a disc from my table, you get this for free. This is like the free Coke sample. Coca-Cola, folks. So that you find out what I'm talking about. It's not real until you get it home and play it in your system when you hear somebody play a guitar, strike a note on a piano, or hit a percussion instrument, and the dynamic range is all there. But it's all dependent on your system, right? All I can do is put the source in front of you. It's up to you then to reproduce it in the best possible way. This as well has video. It has 3 different mixes of each one. You can sit in the middle of the musicians in a circle. I call that a stage mix. An audience perspective mix is when they're all in front of you and just the ambience of the hall comes out the left and rights. And there's, of course, a stereo mix for those of you who are stereo limited. So I did that. I spent a lot of my time. I'm finding out now, I spent too much of that time in the studio 7 days a week because I loved it. I didn't have to do all that work for other people. I could reap the benefits of putting these records out. And they were very well received. I unfurl my roll-up banner at my booth, which only comes out at booth time, trade show time. And there are quotes from people, both reviewers and customers saying, I had no idea audio could be like this, that it could be that real. That when my wife hears, that I'm playing my music downstairs in the basement, she really thinks I've got a rock band down there, or I got a guitar player or a percussionist, because it can be like that. But, and this is where the big if thing shows up. Does it really matter? Is the magic that I've put onto these recordings due to the fact that I recorded them at 96 kilohertz and I deliver them to you at 96 with 24 bits of dynamic range? Or is it the production methodology that I used at the time I put musicians on a stage in Los Angeles, put a pair of stereo microphones, not just one, but a pair of stereo microphones in front of Lawrence Juber, the guitar player, to get a stereo image? Because my Ph.D., I did my recordings with a binaural head. 2 ears are not for left and right. It's for seeing how far something is away from you. It gives you depth, distance. It doesn't give you left and right. Yes, it gives you left and right as well. But it's back to the saber-toothed tiger thing in our pre-dawn. Man, there's an animal over there that's going to come and attack me. How far away is it? That's why we have stereo, for distance. Same thing with an eyeball. Take one away for a while, and distance goes away. You can't tell how far that truck is in front of you as you're driving down the freeway. Same thing with ears. So that methodology that I adopted, having had a lifetime of experience as being an audio engineer, having gotten a PhD with a binaural head mechanism that I did. And having messed with analog tape machines and digital recorders for, boy, it's a lot more than half my life now. 40 some years, 46 years, maybe close to 50, a lot. And you have to then ask the question, which I did after investing. And if you go back and read my blog, I don't know how many, do I have blog readers here? I write a blog, it used to be every day. It's up to about 1,200, 1,300 articles. And I started 2013, I said, I'll put a blog post up there and just write a couple hundred words, whatever, and put it up there. It's realhd-audio.com if you're interested. There is a plethora of articles on just about everything. And if you go back and survey the track of my thought process from being a very active record producer, high-resolution advocate, till today, you will see a reduction in enthusiasm for high-resolution audio. While I was the stand-up poster boy for high-res music, because I have a whole catalog that I'm trying to sell people, do you know, in fact, now in 2019, I can honestly say that it was a waste of $2 million, it was a waste of 20 years of my life, it was a waste of the time that it took me away from my family and the rest of it to create this catalog of roughly 85, 86 albums. That's the really harsh way to look at it. The positive side and the reinforcement that I get back that it may not all have been that dire is the kind of emails that I get from people saying, when I want to impress people with my system, I pull out your discs. I play your files. Your stuff sounds like nothing else I've ever heard from anybody else. And it's a little frustrating to see table after table of ladies and gentlemen like yourselves, filling bags full of vinyl by the pound and walk right past my table. When I know, and you don't yet know, that what's on that sampler disc, fidelity-wise, I'm not talking about content or genre of music, but fidelity-wise, eclipses any of the formats, any of the recordings you'll hear in any of the rooms that you populate this weekend. Guaranteed, unless they're playing my stuff. And I'm not alone, there are some others, 2L, and Todd does a great job with MA and so forth. But in general, those recordings that are out there are part of a system, the music industry, that is not interested in fidelity. They have no interest in maximizing the recorded fidelity of the records that they put out. My example of that is back to Paul Rodgers, the lead singer of Bad Company, who, in the mastering engineering world, the artist never shows up. I mean, I've done projects for Kiss and the Allman Brothers and, they never show up. The mastering guy, you're lucky if there's a producer there, to basically give you a thumbs up on what you're doing, the spacing between the tracks and so forth. But the process of mastering a record is that final opportunity to tweak both the EQ and the dynamics and everything else. You're tweaking some little knob, you're attenuating some frequency, you're tweaking some dynamic processor, a limiter, a compressor, and you're affecting the music in microscopic ways that approach what you think artistically and what the artist thinks artistically is going to maximize what? The fidelity? No. Sales. How many records are we going to sell if it sounds like this versus how many are we going to sell if it sounds like that? So there's Paul, Pat, they're giving me a big thumbs up. That sounds great. This is perfect. And the music was good. I enjoyed it. So what's the next step in the process? It gets sent back up to the record label, where they've got a bunch of know-nothing, non-engineering, non-audiophile, non-hearing executives, right? Who couldn't care less about the fidelity, or whether Paul is happy and Pat is happy, whether those two guys are satisfied with the work that I had done. They listen to it, and what do they listen to it on? Do they go in their audiophile audition room? No, they play it through their desktop computer speakers. And they evaluate and give a thumbs up or thumbs down on the work that I've done in my $250,000 mastering room through B&W speakers and DACs and all the rest of the stuff that I've got, Sonic Solutions, you name it. And what do? It's kind of that, emperor thing. 5 times I got a thumb down. 5 times I was contacted by the same people in the management of that record label when I had the artist sitting in the room with me approving, and they said, no, not loud enough. Make it louder. Make it louder. Because they're interested in sales. When you play that on the radio, ours sounds just this much less loud than the next, record. I did it 5 times until the record label was happy. The artist was not happy. So all this BS when the organizations, various organizations says, oh, high-res music, that's giving you what the artist intended. That's BS. The artist is sitting there with me saying, go for it. And the record label overrules them. Happens every time, guaranteed. They have the right, the record company has the right, not the artist, to define what is issued to the public in their name. So don't fool yourselves into thinking, look, I should have, this is where the projection would come in really handy. Look at, if you've got the handout, it was so dramatic I actually put it on the little flyer here. This diagram in the lower right-hand corner. That was just a clever way to say anybody who wants to. That is a diagram, a graph that's in the book that basically shows you what you're getting. And you're getting that from absolutely every vendor that's out in this show. Here, take a couple, pass them around, and we'll make sure people get what they. That diagram progressively shows you 2 things. Anybody else? Here. We got enough? Pass it down there. I got plenty. There are 2 things in audio engineering in the dynamics world that are worth noting. And actually, this sound that's on this diagram is on the Blu-ray disc to show you what to listen for when you hear this, because listening to an overcompressed record is an audible thing that an audio engineer needs to be able to hear. And I would think, as audiophiles, we'd want to know that too. When I make a recording, that very first slice over in the left-hand side is what is represented on the visual display, the waveform of time versus amplitude. And that one moment, that single sample out of 96,000 samples per second, where there was a rim shot, where there was a loud snap sound, where there was the loudest magnitude sound, that's the sound that actually defines the vertical dimension of that waveform. Now, I don't know when I'm making that recording whether that's going to be this loud or whether it's going to be this loud. As a recording engineer, you always say, look, artist, can you give me the loudest moment you're going to play? Because I need to set some preamplifiers, and the amplifiers that are on or the preamps that are handling the mic inputs on a console or a dedicated external preamp. I need to have some gauge because, look, I'm dead if that whole concert goes by and one moment you went over and I distorted my project. It's useless at that point. I blew it. So what does a recording engineer do? They back off 3 dB, figuring the adrenaline of the performance moment is going to drive them just into that safe zone, and therefore I've made a great recording. That's a really good argument, folks, for engineers using 24 bits. It gives me a bigger palette to be safe in. Turns out there's only 16 bits necessary to deliver to you because you can't hear the difference. Your rooms won't deliver that dynamic range anyway. We'll get to that in a moment. So this is what we want. But now we used to have analog tools called compressors and limiters that would process a dynamic range to be reduced amplitude for those moments that were too loud. We set a threshold, and anything that's over that threshold, volts-wise in the analog domain now, measurements in digital now, anything that's over that threshold, we'll turn it down. It's an automatic turner-downer. And it's really fast. It'll do it fast enough to prevent you from going over. But what is it doing? It's reducing the real-world performance dynamic range that musician has spent 10,000 hours practicing to deliver. So I've seen these YouTube videos about what the mastering people do, and boy, isn't it cool that we can take a Michael Jackson record where the drums are just so out of control, and we can take Vinnie Colaiuta, the studio drummer to the gods, and we can turn him into a flat pancake of dynamic range. That's really not a testament to his musicianship. That's me overarching or overreaching on what I believe that sound should be. That snare drum shouldn't be that loud. I'll turn it down automatically with this compressor limiter. So what I put on this diagram progressively moves from no mastering, compression, dynamics processing, to a little bit, to a moderate amount, to more than a moderate amount, to the last one. If you look at that, what does it look like? It's all loud all the time. Even a whisper is all loud all the time. And believe it or not, which one of these do you think you get when you buy a CD or when you stream something through your Blue OS? You only got one choice. It's those people up in Vancouver who are saying 5 times that's not loud enough. That's the loudest one. So we do 2 things in mastering. We compress, which means take all of the damage. There's another picture in the book. It's not on this sheet. That's on the adjacent page here. We take and we process all the dynamics out. So everything is all loud all the time, because then the apparent level coming through the radio is louder. And it's, look, I can attest to this because I've sat in the mastering studio. If I play something that is louder or perceived to be louder to my client, every single time they will give me the thumbs up. So it's a recursive circle. Louder is better. Well, if loud is better, then louder is better. Loudest would be best of all. In fact, Andrew Sheps, who's like the guru Metallica recording engineer, Grammy guy, brags about the fact that his loudest recording is 18 dB above 0. He's proud of that. And there are tricks that we all know. I teach them to my students because they have to enter that business, where if we compress everything and we shove it up to 0.5 dB above or below max, that's the loudest you can get. And that's what we sell you. You don't have an option. The record companies are not interested in fidelity. And when I say the record companies, the big 3, Universal and Sony and Virgin and whatever else is out there, Warner Brothers. Audiophile records labels like me are, so I don't master my records. Back to the thread that we started, when I make my 96K 24-bit recordings, what differentiates those in terms of the perceived audio that you get when you listen to them is the methodology that I choose to do, or in the case of mastering, not do. Mastering is about sequencing a disc, the spaces in between, the fades, and it's about EQ, and it's about dynamic range. EQ and dynamic range are 2 things I never did to any of my recordings. Now, I challenge anybody to go out there and find a recording on that show floor where somebody has not mastered the record, adjusted volume, or changed the color. And I did none of those things. What came through the microphone on the stage at Zipper Auditorium in downtown LA went through an A to D converter at 96K, 24 bits, was captured on a hard drive, and stayed in that state and that color until it comes out your DAC in your playback environment. Now, I loved mixing records, but what does it mean to mix a record when you're not allowed to do anything? Hands off. What I did do was distribute between left and right, or in the case of FiPi, I never did the stereo. I got so tired of stereo, I'd let my assistant do that. I would mix the 5.1 with you sitting in the middle of the band. I call that a stage perspective. And it takes a little getting used to. Yeah, the snare drum is over my right shoulder. Holy cow, I've never heard a record like that. I have to turn my head over here to hear, there's the drummer, and there's the piano, and there's the lead singer, and there's a guitarist over there, and maybe a percussionist in another area. If you don't like that mix, switch to the audience mix. That puts you in front of the band. And if you're really not happy, you can go with Dominic's mix, which is just the stereo left and right. I like the surrounds thing. So during the mixing process, my choice is to sit at my console and adjust for spatial distribution and for level. And that's it. No EQ, no artificial reverb, nothing that wasn't in that room. Now, if I find that somebody's going to be playing a saxophone solo, Kamasi Washington worked on one of my records before he was a big star. It's a Afro-Cuban Latin jazz project. It's 5 tunes, 56 minutes. I think they're 10, 12 minutes each. All I have to do is push up a fader, and I get a little bit more of Kamasi during that solo section. I'm responsible for the balance of the instruments and where they come out in terms of that distribution through either a stereo or a 5.1 surround speaker system. I love sitting in the middle of the band. A quick aside, I got to share with the Bay Area Audio Society some probably 10 years ago. Got invited up there. Anybody a member of the Bay Area Audio Society? They have a clubhouse, which is one of the dealers up in that area. And they said, come on in. They have 2 rooms that they set up. One was going to be a surround room where I could go in and do my thing. And they had another one in there where they're swapping out power cable to see how that affects the sound. Whatever, I'm not going there. So I'm in that room. I did my thing. And I handed out what was the DVD audio sampler of that era. 21 tracks, 2.5 minutes off of each one of the tracks that I had put on there. The DVD, so it didn't have as much as the current one. And I gave one to everybody. And I encouraged them to take it home and play it in their system like I'm encouraging you to take the Blu-ray version home, listen to it and see what you think. And miracle of miracles, because we know that it's a little embarrassing if you're in the audiophile club endorsing something that's digital based, sometimes is you know what I mean, you like digital? You know, that's like the kiss of death. So this gentleman actually posted to the Bay Area Audio Society website and wrote me an extensive email back saying, this sucks. I sat and I listened, and you told me to listen to the 5.1 surround mix with me sitting in the middle of the band. This is just not normal. It's uncomfortable. I don't want the band to have, you know, that much distribution. It's just not like anything I've ever heard before. Even the quad records or other soundtracks that I've heard in 5.1, the band is still in front of me. What's with this, Waldrep? This is bad. And then I kept listening. And I listened a little more. And I kind of, you know, that's where the guitar is. And that's where the Hammond organ is. And there's the lead singer. You know, there was a lot more room in this mix to hear the various component parts that are part of that band, that ensemble. I could feel him softening. I could feel him, you know, I hate you. Maybe not quite so much. And I'll tell you, by the end of his email, he said, okay, I've listened to 19 tracks of the 21 that are on this disc in the stage perspective, aggressive mix. And I said, what the hell? I'll switch the mix, because you can do that on the fly on these discs. I'll switch to the other audio track that is the 5.1 audience perspective. He didn't go all the way back down to stereo. He just went to, okay, all the band is in front of me and the ambience is coming out the left and right speakers. And guess what he said? He said everything just went flat. All of a sudden, I was in the middle of this music making, and now I'm looking at a painting. I'm still enjoying things, and that was still a 5.1 surround mix. Can you imagine what would happen if you go all the way to stereo? So the moral of that story, ladies and gentlemen, force yourself to listen. Don't take that first reaction that this sucks until you've listened to 20, 30 minutes, a half an hour, maybe the whole thing. Wow. Because this is not, as somebody wrote in one of the comments on my blog the other day, my ambition as a recording engineer and producer and to create the catalog that I created is not to document a live performance. Not to give you the opportunity to swap driving down to the Getty or the Gary Performance Hall and re-experience the LA Phil or a chamber music concert or a rock concert at home. That's not my goal at all. I mean, people attribute that to the record producer engineer world. Yeah, your job, Mark, should be bring me that concert home. That's not my job. Was it the job of Jeff Emmerich and the people at Abbey Road to recreate the Beatles concert through the recordings that they made there? I had the honor, it was one of the high points of my career last November, to go into the studios at Abbey Road where the Beatles made those records. And it's pretty magical. I mean, the vibe is definitely there. Those aren't recordings that are meant to recreate. That is the creative process of putting together a piece of music by carefully choosing which parts fit over, this set of tunes at which tempo, with what feel, with what microphones. It's a very creative process. So my goal was not, when I made my catalog, to recreate what was going on down at the stage at Zipper Auditorium. It was instead to maximize the emotional connection between those notes, that music making, and your heart and soul. And if I can do that with a surround mix that says, oh my God, Jennifer Warnes is over there, and Billy Gibbs is over there, and the Weisenborn is over here, and the drums are over there. If that succeeds in a way that is brought about strictly by technology, then I've succeeded. And I can do things with microphones and recording technique that you can't do acoustically. I was at those sessions where everybody's gathered in a circle, and because I have one head with two ears, I can't be that close to the guitar player and to the percussionist and to the singer and everybody else in the ensemble at the same time, but I can with microphones. I can put microphones in close proximity to everybody. Those are my conscious choices, because what I got as a result in my recordings and what's reflected on this disc is an intimate, close-up, very near you sound. That's not what everybody subscribes to. In fact, I've had people with my classical recordings have to dial up reverb because it's too close. They want to push it back. This one amateur recording guy who I think he respects me, but I'm not sure, because he says, Mark, you're nuts. Your recordings of piano, he does piano recordings apparently, your recordings of piano are just completely ludicrous. That's not the way. What do you mean it's not the way? Well, I've seen the videos. You have the microphones right in there on top of the harp. I got two up high in stereo, and I got two more in an ORTF pair down just above the lower portion of the strings. And his question to me, which is reasonable, I guess, and uninformed, but reasonable, when was the last time you went to a concert with your head inside the piano? Well, I haven't, but I've come close. I really have. My piano instructor taught at CalArts. Gaylord Mowry was his name. We would spend hours in the morning listening, drinking a little wine, practicing, listening. I mean, it was like a 3 or 4 hour piano lesson. He was a faculty member out at CalArts, where I went to school, one of the schools. And he was putting on a concert of a piece by Morty Feldman. Anybody know that name? Very prominent 20th century American composer, worked up at SUNY Buffalo. And his music is very broad, meaning lengthy. He has a 6-hour string quartet. This particular piano piece that he was playing this day, Gaylord was giving a concert at Roy Disney Hall at CalArts, is 4 hours long. A piano piece for 4 hours. It's, you can play golf, listen to a concert. And the room doesn't come with chairs. I walk into the concert that night. It's not like a normal proscenium theater. There's the piano in the middle of the room, and blankets and rugs and pillows, and I mean, they're thinking creature comfort here. And because Gaylord was my instructor, Mark, come. Right under the piano. I mean, this is a 9-foot piano, and I'm laying right underneath it for the whole concert. Lucky me. It was transformative. I was a younger man. I didn't snore, so I didn't interrupt the concert at the time. That would have been unpleasant. He starts kicking me as I'm going. But at that point, the points of sound, it's a very sparse piece. Bing, bing, I think it was for Philip Guston, if I don't remember the name of the piece. But minimalist to the extreme. And I was in and out of consciousness with these little balls of sound just coming right off that soundboard and hitting me. And it was magic. The only reason we have a piano in the form factor that we have pianos is because our arms are this wide and our fingers are this big. That's the only reason. So why not, because we have technology now, why not put these notes into space through the use of that technology and the reproduction of that sound through your speakers or headphones or a 3D beamforming soundbar. We could talk about that too. I should watch time too. So that was magic. Using technology to advance the creative art as an active participant in that process is not the job of a documentarian audio engineer. That's of a creative individual looking to, as I was, maximize the experience of that recording. And I think I've succeeded. I really do. And I get enough feedback, so I haven't given up, even though I feel somewhat trashed in the fact that that high resolution part is really a hoax. So back to that. We are in this 96K 24-bit world based on the end delivery product. Remember I said before 2000, standard def? After 2000, you might say, well, that's high def. No, it's not. It's standard def in a high-res bucket. When you go back to, look, Norman and David T.H.E are friends of mine. Real friends. Not just I know them. I know these people quite well. We've been in the same business, and David's a composer, his brother runs the business. I get it. So it's with some trepidation that I make comments or write something in my blog, and Norman reads my blog, and he gives me enough pushback to say, here's a business based on going to Warner Brothers, going to Universal, and saying with a boatload of money in your pocket, I want to license those tracks from you, from your catalog, and put them out under the guise of HD tracks, or Super Audio High Res, or Q-Buzz, Go-Buzz, whatever. Think about it for a second. The provenance, which is the term that I coined back in 2000 to apply to that pre-2000 stuff. Provenance means the original, circumstance of a piece of art generally, but it could be a bottle of wine, it could be an audio track. We know that in 1971, Neil Young up at his ranch recorded the Harvest album on analog tape. Larry Johnson, rest his soul, is a friend of mine. He recorded that record. It's analog. Now my left brain sort of goes up into the computer science guy in me and says, okay, analog tape, first generation, running at 15 inches per second, half track if you really want to go there, because the wider the track's the better the dynamic range, 60 dB of dynamic range. That's it. That's a fact. Add some noise reduction to that and you can get close to 75 or 80. That's first generation. We have to then copy that when we mix it, we have to copy that when we master it, and we have to copy that when we reproduce it. You're 4 generations down by the time anybody in here gets to hear that. Every time you make a copy, we lose 3 dB of dynamic range. Every time somebody makes a conscious decision to compress that music during the mastering process, which I referred to earlier, you get back to this diagram. The dynamic range of virtually all commercial recordings that have been released in the last 50 years is less than 12 dB because of that flat pancakeness. 1 bit of PCM digital audio data, it's not exactly, but it's close enough to say that's 6 dB of dynamic range. 1 bit gives you 6 dB of dynamic range. 4 bits gives you 24. That's more than to capture all the dynamic range in any commercially released recording. Why are we talking about even 16 bits, let alone 24 or 32? That's all marketing hype, folks. So don't try and sell me another $25 downloaded album saying, oh my God, it's just so cool. And don't get me started on MQA, because that's even a bigger hoax. It can't be a high-res fold the high-frequency stuff down when there isn't any high-frequency stuff there to start with. It's because they're drowning in debt and trying to take a microdollar off of every track that's ever bought and sold, and licensing fees that people go into these businesses. Now, for better or worse, I don't depend on my record label for my livelihood. I'm a university professor. I think the world needs to hear what I'm talking about here. You don't get it from others.